Hello, Professor Kentley here. Have you ever noticed that in some fields there are scholars who just don't get along with each other, especially when they come from different theoretical backgrounds or prefer really different research methods? Well, it's not just the theories and the research methods, but it's the entire perspective that they take, the kind of worldview that we have, to use a philosophical term, the perspective, the way they think about their field, and the way they think about themselves. These are academic worldviews, and they're important to understanding academic fields, and of course to understand the way people write the way that they do in certain fields. I'll talk about that today in this video. Stay tuned. Hopefully today things are better in the linguistics world, but when I was a student in a master's program in linguistics many years ago, this was in the 1990s, I kind of got the sense that sometimes people didn't get along, like between different camps in theoretical linguistics and in applied linguistics. And sometimes they look down on each other. Again, I think maybe it's better today, but back then it was kind of what some linguists called the linguistics wars. And that's because they're different linguists who work in different theories, and they have different research methods. Some are theoretical, some are qualitative, and some are quantitative. I, of course, gravitated more towards the quantitative side, but I do have some background in the theoretical and qualitative, and I appreciate all of them, and I appreciate different theories. Of course, I do have a strong preference for quantitative, as I am a very sciencey and math kind of guy. Well, these are kind of what we call worldviews, and it's not just the theory and the research methods, but it's the way that people think about the work that they do, the way they think about their field. And this has applications to writing, it has applications to the business world, it has applications to all academic fields. How academic people view their world, their academic world, can be kind of described in terms of several different components: the values, the questions that they ask, the goals, the research methods, and the theories. And all of these together form kind of their academic worldview, or what we call a paradigm. A paradigm. And this is kind of a philosophical talk, but it has some practical implications, if you bear with me. So, the the values. What do people in a particular field value? Let me give you an example, actually, from my own experience when I was a young graduate student in linguistics. One day, I was at a bus station waiting to pick up somebody, and of course, in America, in the U.S., people engage in small talk with strangers sometimes, like waiting at a bus stop. So this kind of just average guy tried to start a conversation with me, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a graduate student at the University of Illinois." And he said, "Oh, what do you study?" "I study linguistics." And he said, "Oh, like French and stuff?" I'm like, "No, it's not about French. It's about like how language works in the mind." He says, "Oh, like French and stuff." I'm like, "No." And I was a new grad student in linguistics, and I didn't really know how to explain to an average person. I didn't understand enough about my own field, so I couldn't explain it to just anybody. I think today I could, but back then I just had no idea. Especially what we were getting hit with at the time. We were getting hit with a lot of theoretical stuff as new graduate students, which wasn't. It was so much theory, it wasn't really practical, I think, and that didn't help. So some linguists value the theoretical stuff, though, and there is some value to it, I think. But some linguists value the theoretical stuff very highly, perhaps too highly, but nonetheless, there is. If you're some linguists are less concerned with actually learning different languages themselves, and they're more concerned with how language works, maybe as a logical system in the mind. Some people are more concerned with well, how does language work in the mind and the brain from a more empirical approach, a more scientific approach? Some people are just more concerned with how to learn and teach languages, the teaching aspects. So different people have different values. People in all academic fields value certain things. Certain things are important to them. If you're a linguist, different languages, human languages, and a variety of languages are kind of something that you value, you cherish. It's important to you, and the understanding of that stuff, and maybe learning some of those languages and being able to teach some of those might be values, hopefully, to a lot of you. Along with that comes the questions that you would ask. If you value language as a theoretical system, you're going to ask maybe more theoretical questions with more theoretical goals in mind, in theoretical research methods. So values, questions, goals, research methods, they go all together. If you are interested in language education and teaching, your questions are about maybe how does language work in the mind, and or what are better ways of teaching it according to what we know about how languages are learned and how the mind learns languages. And so your goals are might be more on just understanding the mental aspects of language learning, or it might be on practice, like what are doing research on better practices for teaching certain things. And that's going to influence the research methods you use. Maybe you want to do laboratory experiments to understand more about what happens in the mind when people are learning a language. Or maybe you want to test different methods in classroom research with classroom A and classroom B with different teaching methods, so you can do a scientific comparison. And along with that comes the different theories that you have. Different theories about how language works in the mind, or different theories about language learning. And this is true for education, for sociology, for biology, chemistry, whatever. There are things in your particular field that you value, and certain questions that you ask, which then lead to the certain goals of your field, or even your subfield, or your particular research area. And then the research methods you use, whether you use theoretical or qualitative or quantitative methods, or even something like evaluative, critical, interpretive research methods that I talked about in a previous video. So the theory that you work in kind of defines how you see things. If you work in one theory of linguistics, you see your world in a particular way. But if you work in a different theory of linguistics, you see your world, linguistics, in a somewhat different way, and you're asking somewhat different questions, and you have different research methods. And so all of these things, the values, the questions, the goals, the research methods, and the theories all define what is called the paradigm, which is your academic worldview. So some linguists see their field and their work in a certain way, a certain paradigm, a certain kind of framework, and that includes the theories and the methods and the questions and the goals and the values. Other linguists approach things in a different way, a different paradigm, with a different theory, different goals, research methods, and so on. So the questions that you ask lead to different research methods, and it's often guided by a particular theory. Do you see language as a social phenomenon, as something to learn and teach, as something in the mind to be scientifically understood, or something in the mind to be understood through logical analysis as a logical system? Language as a social communicative tool, language as a social class marker, all kinds of questions you can ask that lead to different theories and different research methods and different approaches, which then lead to different ways of writing up the research. And so the research papers you read from these different approaches will differ. And as a student, are you interested in the more like language as a theoretical construct in the mind, language as a social phenomenon, language learning from a mental perspective, or language learning from more of a practical educational perspective? These are going to influence maybe the kinds of papers you want to write in your classes and the kinds of sources you want to use, the kind of paper topics you want to choose, the kind of approach you want to focus on, because, if you're interested in language learning, that's pretty big. There are all these different approaches and theories in, say, just language learning and teaching. You're going to want to pick one kind of approach, like maybe practical educational methods, and focus on empirical research and focus on one of these more kind of applied approaches to linguistics, a theory of applied linguistics or education theory that fits your view. And so if you're a college student or a graduate student, ask yourself, what kind of things do you like? Do you view language or whatever you're studying, do you view it in a particular way? Try to articulate it. Try to maybe get with some friends and articulate, okay, if someone asks you, why do you study this? What are your goals? What's important to you as you study this as a student in this field? Ask yourself this. Try to articulate it with friends. Practice, trying to explain this stuff to, somebody in your family or a friend who knows nothing about your field. Try to articulate your field, and this might help you to better understand your field. What are your values? What's important to you? What are your questions? What do you want to know? And try to come up with specific questions. What do you want to know in this field? And why do you study it? What would be your goals? How would you want to study it? Or what kind of research methods are you like? Maybe if you're a college student, you're not going to do your own actual original research, but what kind of papers would you like to read about your topic? Would you like to read the more theoretical papers, the more qualitative papers, the more quantitative papers? What appeals to you and why? It's maybe going to speak to your personality, your preferences, the way you think, the way you like to analyze things, and we all have different preferences that kind of shape us too. This will then shape the kind of support in papers that you write in your classes and the papers that you're reading as sources to use to write the papers in your classes. To what degree are you going to use, or the writers, the scholars that you read, going to rely heavily on other research studies within a particular research method or other research methods? The ideas of other scholars, how important is that in your field? Ideas of other scholars are especially more in theoretical and humanities type approaches, and for those of you who are maybe empirical, especially quantitative, it's like we don't care about the people, like who said this. It's like the research results, the scientific results. That's what we care about. So other people's data and results, types of data, qualitative and quantitative data, within the body paragraphs, what kind of stuff you can see. So each body paragraph has like a main idea. So what kind of stuff is going to be in there to support that main idea, that claim? For example, historical records, open-ended interviews, open-ended survey data, or survey data that's based on objective or closed-ended questions like ratings and such. Case studies of individuals, case studies of businesses and companies, business data, financial data, company performance data, statistical results, lab experiments and statistical results of lab experiments, classroom experiments where you have two classrooms each taught in a different method, so you can statistically and scientifically compare the outcomes of these two different teaching methods. Government studies, government statistical databases, observational studies, ethnographic studies. So the specific kind of stuff in your papers is going to be influenced by the kind of paradigm that maybe you're attracted to, or the paradigm of the sources of the papers, the published research papers and books that you're reading and using to write your papers. Now, all of this that I'm talking about, it's kind of philosophical, and it comes from a famous book by Thomas Kuhn and his paradigm theory. Kuhn was a scientist. He was trained as a scientist who then turned to philosophy and began to philosophize and analyze philosophically what science is and what scientists do. And he published a famous book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Excellent book. I highly recommend it. It's a really good book. There is a actually a good part of his theory that I'm not talking about here today because it's not relevant, because he particularly talks about scientific revolutions, but he also talks about kind of like just the normal work that scientists do, which is what I'm talking about. He wrote about science, but I find his ideas apply to anything. Whether you're talking about chemistry, physics, linguistics, sociology, literature studies, history, media studies, film studies, archaeology, engineering, whatever, these ideas describe the work that scholars and scientists do, the paradigms, the values, the goals, the questions, the theories, the research methods, all of that can be described by Kuhn's paradigm theory. Now, it is really practical and useful. Some parts are really sciencey, but it's kind of cool, I think. Do read it if you can, if you really want to understand, especially science, better. I will say a few things before I talk about some applications of what I'm talking about. Let me say a little bit more about Kuhn and his ideas. As a scientist and philosopher, kind of stepped back and kind of wrote about and philosophized about and analyzed what scientists do and how they do their work and how they kind of work as communities and such. Now, his book, his ideas were misunderstood, so it's a little controversial, but it shouldn't be. So first of all, there were a few scientists who misunderstood him and what he was trying to do. Kuhn was a scientist, and so as a scientist, he of course believes in objective reality. Science is based on the idea of objective reality and objective truth. And I think that's clear to me in Kuhn's book that he, of course, holds to that as a scientist would. But there were a few scientists who didn't understand the philosophical angle and thought he was kind of straying from the kind of scientific worldview. He wasn't. There's a few scientists who misunderstood that. More so, though, where the controversy mainly comes from is his ideas were misused by a small group of humanities scholars who misunderstand the science. Now, I know plenty of humanities people who are well-grounded and logical and understand basic science. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a small minority of humanities scholars who don't understand science, who maybe failed science in high school or middle school, and don't understand that science depends on objective reality. Science is a search for objective reality and objective truth. So this is a small group of scholars who don't really accept the idea of objective reality, which of course is really anti-scientific. So it's a small group of anti-scientific humanities scholars who don't represent humanities scholars as a whole, but just a small group who took Kuhn to, who misinterpreted Kuhn in a way that just denies the idea of objective reality, and they turned Kuhn's ideas into something really strange, as if scientists just make up their stuff, like science is just made up, and it's not. Science is real and it's based on reality. And that's where some of the controversy comes from, which is not necessary. And scientists are very much against that kind of misinterpretation of science. Okay, applications of what I've talked about. Understanding your papers, your field. Ask these questions if you're struggling with papers that you're reading or your paper you're trying to write. Okay, for this specific research field, okay, what can you try to just verbalize to yourself? Okay, what are these researchers getting at? What are their goals? What are their questions? What are their assumptions? What kind of assumptions are guiding this? Are they striving for a scientific understanding of objective reality in their field? Is it more subjective, like literature studies is more subjective? Some humanities fields are more subjective. Some are just based on logic and not empirical research. So what are the assumptions? What are the goals, the values? What kind of questions are they ultimately asking? These are things to ask about maybe as you're trying to understand papers, as you're trying to write maybe your papers. For understanding your field, these are important questions to ask. Especially if you're kind of new in the field, or you feel like you're still new in the field, maybe you're a new graduate student, or maybe you're just a a college student in a field that's kind of really broad. So, for example, education is really broad as a field. Language studies, foreign languages are really broad. Like in language studies, you've got in foreign language majors, you got again literature studies, got theoretical linguistics, applied linguistics, culture studies, maybe business applications. You can focus on a specific field. Education. I started as a new PhD student once in educational psychology. I couldn't figure out what the heck this department is, because you got people who are studying school bullying, you got people who are studying like aging and mental abilities of older people, you got people studying infant development, you got people studying high school education, you got people studying language processing, and some people doing applied linguistics, all within the education. Like, what the heck? I just realized education is and educational psychology just hugely broad. Basically, the theme is anything having to do with any kind of application to education, from qualitative or quantitative research fields, from linguistics, from sociology, or whatever. It's all education. So there's really a bunch of different fields within one department or one program. Focus in your specific field, like theoretical linguistics, applied linguistics, language education, culture studies, literature research, particular area of sociology, particular area of education studies, particular area of biology, whatever you're doing. And ask yourself, or ask some other people, older people in the field, older students, get them to verbalize this. Okay, what questions do you ask? What are you trying to understand? What are you trying to solve? What are you getting at? What are your goals? What things are important to you as an applied linguist, or as a biologist, or as an education researcher? What's important to you? What kind of research methods do you use, and why do you use those methods? Why not that? Why not those kinds of methods? Why are these better for you? And ask these kinds of questions to better understand your field, and feel like, or to find out kind of where you want to go. In a number of fields, there are different ways you can go. You can kind of go more qualitative or quantitative, or different research methods and different subfields. Kind of do this, ask questions to figure out where you want to go, what you want to focus on in a field. Talk to experts in the academic field that you're interested in. Ask them these questions. Ask them, what are your goals? What are your questions? What are your theories that you work with? What kind of research do you do? How do you do it? What kind of stuff do you need to know in order to do this research, to do stuff in this field? What kind of skills do you need? This also applies to business. In business, they use the word paradigm in a way that was kind of influenced by Kuhn's book. And in business, a paradigm is like maybe the way a company is structured, the way it's set up, the way it's run, the way it's managed, maybe the hierarchy, the general management philosophy, that kind of stuff. The business model by which a company is run is a business paradigm. So maybe you're interested in working for a company. You're new at a company. Maybe in the interview, or maybe you want to contact some people who work at that company. Say, okay, tell me what is your company about? How do you do things? How does the management work? Is it really hierarchical? Is it really like managers are really kind of dictate to you what to do, or do you have some freedom? Okay, how are things run? What's it like? What's the culture of your company like? In a job interview, if they give you a chance at the end to ask questions, ask about the company culture. What's the culture like? What's the paradigm or the business model like? Ask questions like this or if you're doing business research on business, ask these questions as you're doing research on a company. This can be a way to understand people maybe from other fields. Maybe you're studying in a linguistics program or an education program, and you've got classmates who are just doing really different stuff. You don't understand what they do, and it seems like you don't know how to communicate with them. Maybe you meet academic people from different fields, and how do you talk to them? Well, ask them these kinds of questions. Okay, why do you study that? Why you study that research? What's your research topic? Why are you studying that? Why you're interested in that? What are your goals? What are your questions? How are you trying to figure it out? How are you researching it? You may end up dating somebody or marrying somebody from a different field, and especially if to both of you education is important to you, in your field of study. Hey, if a linguist is dating a physicist, that can be kind of weird because like they don't know how to talk to each other. They may have other things in common, but they can't talk about their work or their research. Well, maybe, if you're in that situation, okay, ask these questions of your partner. Okay, what do you do? Why do you study that? Why are you into it? What are you interested in? How are you trying to do it? Ask these questions as a way of kind of bridging the gap with like your friends, your romantic partners, so you can better understand what they do. Finally, one other thing is I want to talk about job skills. Maybe you get trained in one particular kind of paradigm. Maybe you are trained in, say, literature analysis or linguistic analysis or economic analysis, sociological analysis, but you need to get a company job, and why would a company want to hire you as an English major or as a sociology major or as a philosophy major? But you know what? In the United States, how many people work in a job that's directly related to their college major? 27%. 27% of people work in a job directly related to their college major. Most people, either after college or later on in their careers, are in a job that's not directly related to their major. And one way to get a job is to think about what skills did you learn in this field that can transfer to another field. So you have to abstract away the content of your field and think about, okay, aside from the content of what you studied, maybe you did literature, you did economics, what were the analytical skills that you learned? How you learned to analyze literature, how you learned to analyze economic models, how you learn to analyze sociological problems or whatever. What are the analytical skills, and how can you apply the kind of analysis to something else, like a business problem? Okay, think about that, or a company culture problem. Think about the analytical skills, the critical thinking skills, the problem-solving skills, the creativity, the creative thinking skills, various kinds of skills that you got doing that stuff in college, and how that might apply to a company. So abstract that away from the paradigm. Think about the skills, because sometimes the skills can transfer across paradigms or from one field to a job that's seemingly not related. Think about it. It'll take some time. Maybe try to articulate this with some friends, but it might be a way of getting a job, especially today when the job market is kind of difficult in many places. So that's the end of this video series on genre and academic writing. I hope it was kind of useful. Hope your head hasn't exploded, or your brain might be a little full. Okay, go take a break. Drink some coffee, take a break. Hope this might have been helpful in some way. I hope this helps you. So good luck in your studies, in your writing, and your lives. Goodbye.